What's up, everybody? I'm John Schaefer, and today on the Atomic Mass Transmissions Live, I'm going to be painting some droids for the Separatist Specialists. We kind of polled everybody last week, and it sounds like everybody wanted to see both the PK Worker Droid and the Viper Droid the most, so I'm going to paint both today. So I'll also kind of go over where I've gotten on the Medical Droid, because I started him as well, and I can show you how our tactical droid wound up from last week. So let's get the camera over to what you guys want to see. All right, so this is our T-Series tactical droid that I started painting last week. I obviously added a little bit more to him this time around. I think we dubbed him T4CO in light of a taco-themed week last week. So I kind of went through, and based on the colors of my existing army, I decided to kind of add some more green to him. And then his chest plate had so much flat area on it, I decided to kind of add a couple extra markings to him, and just kind of break up that big, large, flat area. So anyway, that's how that fella turned out. The other droid that I have been working on right now is this medical droid. Kind of started off on this one, and my intention here is to kind of match some of the metallic colors that I'm eventually going to add to my droidicas. They have this kind of cool, kind of coppery purple, kind of anodized look on the back carapace of them, and it's a color that I want to carry through. So this is kind of where this guy's at right now. Mostly just a base coat of copperish kind of metallic, and then a purple wash over top. So yeah, chipping away on this one. Been a good time, but that's not what we're painting today. Today we are painting the PK series worker droid and the Viper Recon droid. So this is the PK, this little fella here, who's got a nice B1 head in his hand. Alas, poor Roger, we knew him well. And the other one is the Viper Recon droid, which I have decided, because it has a clear flight stand on it, to attach it to this piece of cork with a little paper clip in there. So I just took a little hand drill, drilled a little hole up through the bottom of them, and then inserted a paper clip with a little dab of super glue so I could remove that pretty easily later on. So I'm going to paint both of these in colors similar to the rest of my droid army, but I feel like, what colors would you like to see? So let's start off with the Viper droid. Would you like to see it in a traditional black and more of a bone color, or do we want to do something with a lot of greens in it? What do you guys think? Oh, looking here, it looks like the materials I used on the base are going back to these fellows here. This is just slate that I got from, I ordered it online, but you can find it if you're in certain parts of the world, pretty easily out in a parking lot. They're just rocks. And I jammed those rocks into a little bit of 2-part putty on the base, and then put some sand over top and textured it all. And it's just a preferred method I have for basing. I like how it turns out. Kind of see a different general scheme. This is the one that I typically use for my army, but the T series that we did last week, I decided to do something a little different for a Geonosis theme. So yeah, that's largely it. When we get to the hobby extravaganza that's going to be coming up in the middle to late of March, I'll be talking a lot about some basing techniques coming up. So I'm going to cover a lot of different climates and different approaches there, how to build the bases that you see here, kind of walk you through it, among a number of other awesome panels that we have set up. A lot of painting going on with Dallas, Will, and myself, a lot of dev talks. It's going to be super awesome, so I hope you guys can attend. Anyway, back to this little Viper droid. Where do we land? What are you guys thinking? Boring black? Maybe more of a bone color? Let's see what we got. Green would be cool. I'm seeing some votes for green. All right, so I'm going to go kind of heavy on the green, and I'm going to use those same kind of greens that I've used before. As a recap of that, I'm utilizing some Vejo colors. So I've got an emerald green here. I've got golden olive, and then I tone both of those down with a darker green, and I'm using black forest green from Scale Color. So that's my triad of greens right there. So I think that the little leg bits down here on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. Those are going to be black, but a lot of the carapace areas up above, I'm going to do in more greens over top. So I'm going to go ahead and get started by thinning down a little bit of black with a little bit of flow improver and a bit of matte medium. It's just a typical mix that I like to use for a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and block in these legs right quick. Thin this down slightly. So we get a little bit of a wash effect. It's going to, pick out a little bit of the details. It's going to probably in the end breed a little bit more gray than just straight black, but that's all right. Kind of consistent with how I've been painting the blacks on the rest of my forces. Just kind of keep moving around here and base coating all this stuff. I'm using a size 2 brush. That's pretty much what my go-to for most basic painting. All your base coats, and if you have a good tip like this fella, you can even get a lot of detail work done as well. So the advantage of using a larger brush like this, as we mentioned in the past, is that it just holds more paint, and you can easily apply it across the entire miniature without having to load it up all the time. It's a little bit too thin, so go back to my mix. He's got this little arm bit down here too. That goes. And I think while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead. This little droid has got a lot of little lenses around the outside, so I'm going to go ahead and base coat those with a bit of this black as well. I'm not too worried about being perfect with all this stuff, all these base coats. These are the early stages. Kind of as I've talked about in the past, I'm a big fan of just working up the whole miniature at once and getting a lot of the basic colors in there. Then you can always go back in and just do a little tidying up later. The other thing I like about these droids, both of these in fact, is that they have this really big, large lens eye on the front, and that's something I really enjoy painting. I'll show you how I go about that. A pretty simple procedure. Okay, let's finish these base coats and get this a little bit more even across everything. Cool. I'd be Donnie. You tried the glaze technique you saw me use on a Mando. Is that me or somebody else? Anyway. Yeah, that glazing technique is great when you have like these kind of large flat areas, like on this fella here. Just applying a little bit of that darker color and then feathering it out with kind of thin layers. Sometimes using kind of 2 brushes in order to do it. It's a pretty quick way that produces pretty good results in general. So I think when you're going through and you're painting entire armies and that sort of thing, it's a good technique to have in your arsenal for sure. Okay. Oh, this little guy is going to be adorable in green. I can already picture it in my mind. For those that haven't heard, in the US, these products have been delayed a little bit, but we got confirmation that they're going to be releasing on March 12th. That's both the Republic and the Separatist Specialist, both. So if you are eagerly awaiting those, like I'm sure a lot of people are, that's when you can expect them in the US. They've already been released in the rest of the world on the 19th of February. Okay, we'll continue to kind of paint these little bits on here. I think to balance out some of this black, I'm also going to paint these antennas up on top black. It's just something in general, I kind of like to just balance out colors across the whole miniature whenever I can, just to kind of keep the composition a little bit more even. There's some exceptions. Sometimes you want just like a real tiny spot color, like a real accentuated bit. In general, I kind of like to stick to color schemes that have like 3 or 4 main colors. I think if you go like over 5, you're kind of pushing it. In some cases, it starts to just look really busy. And now you, of course, would be highlighting and shading each of those individual 5 colors. But, you know, as far as like a base approach, I think kind of limiting your overall scheme to no more than 5 different contrasting colors is a good general practice. But, you know, painting is so subjective. You kind of pick and choose how you want to do it. That's my rule of thumb for when I paint. Okay, we got some black legs, we got some black arms, some black lenses, and some antennae. Let's get to that green. I'm going to start off with the lighter of the two. I'm going to do a kind of a two-tone effect. I've got kind of like that jade green and then that more olive green. I'm going to thin this down just a little bit. Let me get a little bit thinner over here. And then I think, you know, while this technique starts to dry, we can start working on the PK. See how this looks. Ooh, that's very light. Let's go more paint. We'll just apply this whole little section in here, and then we'll start to pick out some other additional little panels and stuff in the darker color. Zip around here. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about future streams. I think you know, next week I'm toying between painting Armada squadrons and an X-wing repaint. Well, just to kind of shake it up a little bit, do a little something different. The new squadron packs that are coming out have some cool alternate schemes in there, and there's some of the artwork that has some schemes that I like in particular. So yeah, I'll take a look and get it all planned out. Is there a particular ship or series of ships that you guys would like to see? I posted it in the chat, and I'll review that after the stream. Formulate a game plan. Oh, this little olive guy. These guys are pretty cool in the game. They throw out observation tokens on enemy units, which give you rerolls. Certainly a welcome thing in the Separatist Alliance, as they're not the best shots, typically. Depends on the unit, of course, but rely a lot on surge tokens and other things like that to be able to make their attacks more effective. All right. Okay, that's a green little guy. All right, well that one's drying. Let's shift back over to old PK here. All right, so we're doing that one in green. The typical scheme is light in color. What if we make this little guy more insidious and make him largely black? Let's try that. Now this guy doesn't seem like, he doesn't look very insidious, but maybe just with a color shift, we'll see exactly how that might affect the perception of this humble PK worker droid. These little guys are great at repairing vehicles and other droids and bring them back to life in some cases, and that can be a very useful thing, especially when you're trying to hold some objectives or keep your guys in the fight. Get this kind of like large loincloth plate. I think I'm going to do that in a contrasting color. Ooh, and these shin pads too. Maybe I'll do those in a different color too. Let's hit those up on the other sides. Legs in there. And then I'm going to paint the helmet of the B1 that's in his hands in kind of a bone color. That'll stand out nice against the rest of his body. And it will match my army. Conceptualizing a scheme for a full X-Wing squad and then painting one as an example would be cool. Yeah, there's lots of great different squadrons you could do. You know, you've got Gray Squadron, Gold Squadron, Rogue Squadron, just on the Rebel side, and then there's just a number of other different approaches you could go down for all the other factions as well. And get the back up on this guy too. So for this, I'm gonna take a second brush that is just got a little bit of my flow improver and stuff on it. I'm just gonna try to like wick away a little bit of this excess paint and just kind of pull it down a little bit. Hopefully make our highlighting process a little bit easier later. Just gonna pull that down a little bit and we can darken that up with a couple extra layers. But for now, we're just getting a lot of black on here. So I think like a big green eye would be cool. I think I'm gonna go green on the large lens here on the front. His tiny little feet. I did cheat a little bit. I went ahead and did the base on this fella ahead of time, just because I was killing time when I was painting with my friends this week, working on other stuff, and I was just kind of chipping away on that T-Series TAC droid and the medical droid as well. And I like to just kind of bounce around in between different miniatures when I'm painting squads, just while stuff dries, just like I'm doing right now between these two droids. Just keeps you at peak efficiency. And everybody knows that is vital. Or not. You choose. I like to feel like I'm pretty productive when I paint, so yeah, I'm oftentimes thinking about ways that I can save time and make the stuff go by a little bit quicker, or to get all this stuff onto the tabletop as soon as I can to get playing some games. Dark little droid. See where you're going. All right, doesn't look like much now, but we'll flesh out some stuff. Let's go back to our little olive buddy right here. So let's start picking out a couple of these other panels in that darker, kind of more forest green, I suppose. So looking at how this thing is broken up, I want to think about like how it can I can get like some good even coverage. Maybe I'll just go like the top half, the bottom half, and then I've got like this extra ring. So this little ring in here will be dark, and then the lower portion underneath here will be darker as well. And then we'll have like this kind of olive colored ring in the middle. Try that. Any tips on lens reflection techniques? Now, do you mean like in terms of like a lens? Like this was kind of a quick and dirty version. So this is how a lot of lenses are typically painted, where you've got like a kind of a fade from, and you usually choose a consistent side, one corner or the other, where you've got a fade from dark to light, with that bottom like left-handed edge of the lens being a really bright color, and then you just put a little tiny dot of white in there to represent like a reflection in it. And that is typically how these kind of lenses, at least that's how I often paint them. I've seen some people do it other ways, but I think it pops pretty well from a distance and it looks pretty cool. So that's usually how I go about it. Outrider Dan, is that oh dude, yeah. OLIV3. Oh man, you guys are naming all my droids for me, and it is wonderful. Thank you. T4CO. OLIV3. What's that PK guy gonna be called? Yeah, I'm feeling this two-tone. It's got kind of like a little break in it, like this little panel like extends beyond there, so I'm not going to dip into that part. Just keep it a little separate so it looks... Well, I kind of already messed up a little bit there, but we'll touch it up. Touch-up phase. We'll get back to it. $2B and $2B for the PK. Yep. You guys, pretty good at this. All right, underneath here, we'll do this. A darker green. I'm thinking for maximum contrast, maybe we'll go with like purple lenses on this one. That sounds fun. Yeah, we're only 20 minutes into it. I'm gonna have lots of time to paint some lenses. Cool. Oh, you're right. Will I be 3? Of course. Red lens. Pimentos. Yup. We're doing that. This paint's thinned down just a little bit, so I'm going to do a couple extra quotes just so I get a nice even appearance on it. But it is thinned down enough that you can see like it's kind of rested down in the crevices a little bit. That's just saving me a little bit of time and doing some extra highlights and stuff. You know, we really like to use that kind of zenithal prime on things. It just saves you a ton of time. When we're trying to cram, you know, getting miniatures painted in an hour, tabletop standard, it really speeds up the process. So I highly recommend you try it out if you have not yet. You know what? I think I'm going to paint this little rim around this big lens right here, that darker green too, just to kind of break it up. So I get a little bit of that darker green that bleeds into the band of the olive color. Oh yeah. Okay. I feel like our other fella needs some love, so I'm just gonna keep jumping back and forth. Hopefully that won't be too just disjointed for you all, but that's how I'm gonna do it. Okay, so let's get a base coat down on the droid there. So what I'm using for the bone color is birch for the base, and then I thin down a little bit of Arabic shadow for the dark parts. Thin that down and apply it in a wash. So go ahead and apply the base coats to this B1 noggin right here. If you are impatient, how long do I have to wait before base coating green stuff? You know, it's interesting because it kind of depends on your ratio of the blue part to the yellow part. So those that don't know what green stuff is, it's a two-part modeling putty that many sculptors traditionally used to sculpt miniatures before the rise of the digital age and paint and sculpting things in programs like ZBrush, etc. And if you have, and I can't remember which one is which, but one of them actually causes it to dry a little bit faster. And I think it's the blue part. Might have to do some research about that. But generally speaking, I think I typically wait like an hour, at least an hour before I do anything with it. But ideally, like if you're doing like a cape or something, you're going to touch a lot. Boy, I would let that thing sit like at least 3-4 hours, or maybe even overnight is going to be best. It's just it is the worst when you've like spent all this time sculpting some cool thing like a cloak or something on a miniature, and then you just put your fat thumb right into it and put a thumbprint in it. And I have done that enough times to be very cautious when it comes to painting anything that I have sculpted on a miniature. I went through and did a lot of additional cloaks and things on my scout troopers, and that was a ton of fun. But I learned some lessons along the way about letting things dry for sure. Right. We're gonna get this base coat down here on this little head. This guy definitely needs some green. He's gonna have a green lens. Let's go ahead and just base coat that thing right now. So I like to start off with the darkest color first and then highlight up. So I'm not really thinning this down too much because I want some pretty good coverage. So this is just pretty much straight out of the bottle. And the versions you saw in the film, although briefly, in I can't remember their first appearance, if it was in Attack of the Clones or anyway, they're kind of milling around in the background. They have like a a large kind of white lens and then like a little smaller black one. I always feel like that just looks too much like a human eye. So I kind of like the look of just one big flat lens. We're gonna rock it like that. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead while we're getting situated here to I'm just gonna go ahead and start painting in how I typically do these lenses. So starting down here on this lower left quadrant of this, I'm gonna add a little bit of that same paint with just a little bit more of that olive mixed into it. The key to this, I think, is getting a pretty good transition, but you really want like a little sliver of the brightest color right along the bottom edge of it, like right along here. And sometimes, like for the first pass, I'll just make sure that I get a nice even one, and this is way wider than I really want it to be. Then while it's still a little bit wet, I can just kind of feather in slightly a mix of those two extremes. I'm not sure how well that's getting picked up. You get a little bit of glare while the paint's wet too, but that almost kind of shows you like what the end result is going to be like, right? Like that little reflection is going to be in the upper right-hand corner though. On the opposite side, I'll start up here and I'll go black, a much darker kind of color. Start shading in that. I'm going to start employing the old two brush technique here, where I've got a second brush here to just feather out the edges of those paints without having to rinse my brush out. So you see we're starting to get a little bit of a fade there. I need to kind of smooth it out a little bit more. Checking out some comments. Looks like you guys are AMG branded modeling surprise brushes, handles. I think anything's possible. There's a lot of great manufacturers out there already, and I'm not sure. I think that we probably like to focus more of our time and energy on just creating awesome miniatures. Like that's our gig. I think the hobby supplies and things are cool, but there's a lot of options out there in the market right now. But you never know. There becomes like a significant demand for such a thing, we might explore it. No promises, of course. But yeah, by and large, I think it's more miniatures. It's more time that we can just spend on making cool stuff for your games. All right, so we got this like kind of large bone kind of colored area here. I've got a rim around that lens that I'm going to darken in here with a little bit more of this black. Do that. I'm letting that lens dry a little bit before I go in and do the next layers. Just tidy that up. Use a little of that black and just kind of pull it back down in there a little bit more too. You can kind of see it there. A little dark on the screen, it looks like, but so for the lower that lower highlight area, I want to make that guy pop. So I'm going to go way brighter than the standard green, and I'm going to take a little bit of just straight yellow. This is a Soul Yellow from Scale Color. And I'm going to mix that into that green to make it really jump. So we can hopefully get some good contrast. How long until Luke gives us a unit of Gungans? I don't know. It would be cool to start doing some alien races. Got Geonosians, Gungans. Lots of different choices in the Star Wars. So it's, you know, brighter down there along that edge. And this again is not, you know, the smoothest transition here, the smoothest blend, but for the sake of expediency, I'm just going to go ahead and soldier on. You can go back and forth, just thinning down your paints to different degrees and just kind of, oh, Bendu, that would be cool. It would be huge. But yeah, you kind of go back and forth and just kind of feather out these colors. Just kind of blend over top of them. So let's see if I can get it so it doesn't have too much of a, you can kind of see what's going on there. I think one more little sliver along that lower left-hand edge of just almost pure yellow would be cool. We'll just kind of really drive home the effect. Well, it's nice and bright. And then the real magic happens when you just add one little tiny dot of white. So don't thin this down too much. You want it to be nice and opaque. Take just a little dot of white. You just want to apply that kind of right in the center of that darkest area, right like there. Then you start to have a cool looking little lens. You can add a couple extra little dots. You might want to, you know, make that little reflection up in the upper right, kind of more of a crescent shape, if you like. Your own choice, really. All right, so he's got a bit of a loincloth thing down here in the lower portion. I do want to paint that a different color. It's got kind of like two panels, so I think to achieve this kind of two-tone thing that I have going on with a lot of the greens, I'm going to do this green too. But I'm going to make this half, or this, I guess, third of it, the dark green, and then this third of it, the dark green, and then just do a green stripe right down that middle. On this flip side, I'm just going to do this whole thing because it doesn't have any of those lines or anything. I'll just do this in the darker green. We'll probably do a couple passes on these colors. Get them nice and popping. Oh, Hurricane Girl, that is a B1 battle droid head, like this little guy. You can see here, side by side, like holding it in his little hands because he repairs droids. That's his whole shtick. Geonosians, yeah. I love them. Whoa, dropped a brush. Hold on one sec. Here we go. Yeah, I would love to see them. They have like a bunch of different cool units. They got like little support weapons and geez, there's even zombie versions later on. I always thought they were like a really cool alien design. All right, we got this little stripe in here. Lighter green. That kind of down the middle. So I do feel like, kind of as I mentioned last week, I like to think about when I have these kind of accent colors, like setting them up in triangles, you know, like somewhere else. So I think like balancing it out somewhere else, like on the arms or something would be cool. Maybe I just do these little, yeah, I'll just do these little plates down below. That'll just make a cool little triangle too with that accent color. It's just a preference that I have when it comes to composition on various colors across the miniature. I think that it's just a good practice in general to kind of even out your colors so you have like kind of a nice distribution, just like composition in a painting. Like you'll have, you know, purples all over the place to kind of balance things out in some cases. Well, that's a pretty broad statement about painting, but you get what I'm saying. But see, now we've had this kind of like triangular effect of those kind of three little things, and I think it starts to balance things out, especially with this big green lens up here on the top. So do another coat. Lizam, this is from, yeah, I'm sorry, somebody already answered. Outrider Dan's got me. It's from the Specialist Pack. It's supposed to be coming out on March 12th. It's got 4 droids in it. It's got this guy. It's got this guy. T-Series TAC droid. It's got a medical droid in it. Like that. And it's got a little olive buddy right here too. All right, just throwing down some more green on here, and then I think we're going to shift back over to the other droid. Just flatten some of this out, and then I think a little bit of a wash to kind of fill in some of these spots here where I don't have very great coverage. I'm going to just take a little bit of that thin down black that I had before and just block all that stuff in so it covers up the white undercoat. Makes it a little bit less messy. Got that down there. Oh, and he's got this, what is that? Is that part of his hand? I'm just going to paint it black. When in doubt, paint it black. Over here too. Okay, one thing I did want to mention. So this is the base for the Viper Probe Droid, and what I did for this is, it's got a flight stand in here that you can't see because I've wrapped it up in some masking tape, and I like to just leave that masking tape on it. Now you can alternatively, if you want to, just leave these separate, paint your base and then glue them on top. But I like to kind of sink. There's like a little round lip around the bottom of the flight stand. And I like to sink that down into my basing material and then just put sand all the way up to the edge. It just makes for a nicer finish. So I'll just leave that on there. I'll go through here and dry brush this. I'll save this for later because I've already kind of covered the basing stuff before, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time on the droids themselves. So we're gonna go back to this guy. Well, I am very happy to be doing these kind of tutorials. Like I love miniature painting. I've been doing it for a super long time. It's a very rewarding aspect of these games. It's just a hobby that I engage in all the time, and for us to be able to kind of share this stuff and just hang out with people on the chat is awesome. Like it's such a rewarding and fun thing for me to do, and then it sounds like you guys enjoy it too. So we are happy to do it, and we have many plans to continue to do so. Especially for the mini extravaganza coming up. So we're going to be streaming pretty much nonstop for 3 days, covering so many topics, so many tutorials, lots of reveals, good times. We hope you join us. That is March 18th through the 20th. Okay. Let's thin down a little bit of that dark green paint. I'm just going to mix it in just a little bit with some black to make it a little bit darker, to make a little bit of a wash, to help pick out some of these panels and things we have in here. And as opposed to just like painting over the entire thing, I'm just going to try to like line in and just only apply this to the cracks, and hopefully it'll kind of chase through there pretty well. So we've got like this little line right here. I'm going to try to put a little bit in there. I'm not afraid to just use my finger because I'm going to go back in and kind of highlight and pump up the green a little bit, but I think this will just help define some of these recessed areas around here and just define a little bit more of the detail. You can see like down in here, like that little panel up top, we're just going to try to chase in these little colors here. Just make that a little bit darker. It always helps me, like when I'm trying to do this kind of precision work. I've chosen a smaller brush. I think this is like a size 1, maybe. I've actually worn it off the handle, so I can't tell you immediately, but it looks like about a size 1. and I just choke way up on it. Like I get my finger almost all the way up to the very end, and then I've kind of like I brace my two hands together. It just helps with detail. Like if you're struggling a little bit with painting detail, like small little things on miniatures, like give that a shot. It's going to be a little bit different for each person as far as like what's the most comfortable for you, but I find that getting more control, finding like a motion that's like really easy to replicate, like, you know, kind of last few digits of my fingers moving like that, and then just make a point of contact between your two hands and kind of bridge them together. That helps me a lot, and it might help you. Fill gaps with liquid superglue and baking soda. It's not going to give you a very smooth finish. It tends to be like a little crumbly and a little. It dries super fast. It's like really quick. I like to use I like to use green stuff, or I mean, if the gap is really slight, I'll paint a little bit of plastic glue in there to kind of solidify it a little bit, and fill in the gaps. But I think that's a good technique for terrain and just kind of like more forgiving larger stuff. But when it comes to miniatures, like, you know, the detail is so small, and anytime that you obscure that, I think it really messes with the overall finish of the miniature. So I don't know, maybe you'll have good results with it, but I would test it out on something you don't care about very much first before you commit to it. Because in my experience, the whole baking soda and super glue technique just gives you kind of a rough, gnarly texture. Now that can be really cool if you're doing like rust stuff or anything that would kind of demand a texture like that, but proceed with caution, I guess, is my word of advice to you for that. Right, we're going to go through here and we're going to highlight the top edge of that kind of olive color with a mix of a bone and the olive color that we used as the base coat. So a little bit of birch and what was it called again? Golden olive. I'm just going to do a couple little line highlights and stuff here and there. Looks like we got 18 minutes left. Feel good about where we're at. I think I'm going to get these guys at least looking pretty decent, and I can always finish them up later. But making some good progress in an hour. This top little edge here, we'll just hit that up with a little bit of a lighter color. Some of the edges of these panels and stuff. And I'm not too worried about a really fine, teeny tiny edge highlight, because I'm going to go back in and with the base coat color and tidy up a little bit of these messy bits. Like, you know, my wash got a little bit stray over here and, you know, things like that. So yeah, these kind of like larger areas like this, I like to do that technique where you kind of apply your edge highlight. You're not too worried about it being, you know, a little bit overly thick, and then you can just go back in with the base coat color like I'm about to do here and just shave back into it a little bit. The contrast is not super great. I'm not sure how well it's going to pick up on the camera, but just smooth out that base coat. This guy's got a lot of little lenses on him. I guess I can show you how I can, how sometimes I paint those lenses in a faster fashion if I have a bajillion of them like this guy does. The tippy top. Cool, that's looking pretty good. Let's move on to some lens time. I'm again going to start with a pretty dark red. Let me find a suitable one. That's not the best. Yeah, here we go. Deep red. Pretty dark. Shake it up really well. Yeah, I've heard good stuff about that Vallejo plastic putty. I've not used it yet. A lot of times my go-to material is actually, it's a two-part putty that was originally intended for taxidermists. As weird as that sounds, they use it for like the the gums on when they're like stuffing animals and stuff. It's nice because it kind of works like clay in that it's really kind of water soluble, so you can kind of thin it down and smooth it down really easily. I think it's typically called epoxy sculpt with an A. And that stuff is pretty cool. That's often what I use for the basing material on my bases. You can get it in a pretty big batch for relatively cheap. All right, we're gonna keep zipping around. This front lens is cool because it's got like a little extra indentation in it. So we'll try to pick that out a little bit if we got time. There's like an extra little concentric circle inside of the main lens. I'm not sure if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. It's got that little tiny bit. Looks cool. Good call on the red. This is definitely doing that olive style justice. All right, got a bunch of those. I think while that layer of red dries a little bit, I'm gonna just do some really quick and dirty edge highlights on this black just to make it look a little bit more finished. So I'm gonna go and just take kind of a medium gray. You can choose to highlight your blacks with warm grays or cool grays, whatever you really choose. It does produce a bit of a different effect overall, but if you're just looking for something neutral, use a neutral gray like I'm gonna. Lizium, I've got some test models of a bunch of miniatures here if you want to see them. So this is what my B2s look like. Okay, there. And I've got a BX droid. This is often what I do when I'm starting a new army. Is I like to just do like a test model of every unit I intend to include in the force. So I got a BX there. I think I showed you my B1s before. This guy is largely based off of some examples I've seen of an AAT tank driver with this kind of like green stuff up on the helmet. I thought that looked really cool, so I wanted to go through and do that. And then yeah, you got this fella as well. And then I'm also working on a Grievous or a Greenvis, as I like to call him, which has got a lot of green on him, which is something a little bit different. That's like one of my favorite things about this is that everybody can take these miniatures that everybody knows and loves, but you can just invest and go whatever direction you want. You can be as creative as you like. You can paint it exactly like you saw it on screen, or you can just devise your entirely unique scheme. And I think that variations on a theme is really cool. It's like great to see. Oh, hold on, I've thinned this down too much. Pro tip: when you are edge highlighting, don't thin down your paints very much. Like I think you want to leave it pretty thick so it can kind of stay right on the edges as well as you possibly can. And then take off a little bit of the excess too. So let's see if this works a little bit better. I'm still applying a little bit too much pressure, so it's a little bit thicker than I like on these little tiny edges, but whatevs. Touch up phase. We'll go back up and tidy these things up. I'm just going to apply like a real light pressure, and I'm really trying to use the like I'm going past it. Like it's kind of hard to see because these legs are black against a black backdrop. But I'm like, if this is the edge, like where the tip of my brush is, I'm not going straight at it with the tip of my brush. I'm going past that and then using the side of my brush to just pull down on that edge. And I think it produces some better results. And it's a little bit more forgiving too. Like you can just kind of start to get into a rhythm once you kind of find your right pressure. And then, I'll just turn this thing in a different direction to make sure that I can hit the edges of all these little legs more easily. I think it's a lot easier to just turn the miniature around than trying to get in some weird position where you're like going over top or doing something weird. Food themed army. Mostly basing all this stuff for kind of like a foresty kind of theme. I think my Empire army is is kind of loosely based on the remnants of Endor. A Tempest Squadron, I think, is maybe what they're called. As Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars. Although some of these newer ones, like Rogue One and stuff, are definitely high up there too. But Return of the Jedi holds a special place in my heart. I saw it in theaters when I was a wee lad, not to date myself. Pretty fond memories of that one. Really into Ewoks. Yeah, that's right. These were delayed until March 12th in the US only. So they should be coming out everywhere else or already have been released in the rest of the world. But we experienced some delays with the rail system, as a lot of other businesses are currently enduring. Yeah, it's just taking a little bit of extra time to get all that stuff out there. So we're eager for everybody to get them. It's just going to take a little bit longer. We haven't really heard about any other sort of delays yet, but you know, it's just we're just waiting. My hope is that everything will, after this initial delay, everything will start to hit the market just like we want it to. Okay, let's get to painting some lens bits. So for that, the next two steps on the color, I'm going to go up here with these kind of brighter reds and orange, Aldebaran red and Mars orange. And because I have so many of these, and we've got 8 minutes left, I'm going to zip around them real quick, try to give a general look. And then I think with the last 5 minutes, I'm going to dry brush this base, and I'm going to pull this tape off of here so you can kind of see what I got going on with that for the base of this Probe Droid. Again, I'm kind of focusing a lot of the highlight down in the lower left-hand quadrant of this. For all these, I'm just going to do this kind of quick and dirty. I'm just going to do like a 2-step process on all these. 3 steps technically. You're going to have this color, you're going to have one more little highlight, and I'm just kind of like painting that lower portion of it on each one. Lower left hand, just rotate this fella around as I go. Okay, now let's take a little bit of that Mars orange. I'm also going to add a little bit of some yellow to it too. Make it pop just a little bit more. Okay, now we're just going to zip around here, and again, I'm choking way up on it. I'm going to try to put a little slight sliver on each one of these. Okay, my paint needs to be a little bit thicker. It's not the coverage that I want. There. Dupe. Dupe. Little carousel of eyeballs. Cool, looking good. And now, the final step. Set dates for reprints expected like ATSTs. I am unsure about the reprint schedule. That is something that we in the studio don't have a ton of control over. Just a little dot, upper corner of each one of these things. You can kind of see what's going on there. Yeah, that's looking good. Like, oh man, this little olive is going to make it into so many of my games. It is too cute. Pass up. That, and I like the rules for it. Doop, doop. One is a little big, but that looks okay. And I see a little area where I went outside the lines a bit. So I'm just going to go through here. Yeah, ATSD is my fave too. I know they're diligently reprinting stuff. They're constantly like churning through it. So it just takes a while to reprint the stuff, you know. I think we also didn't anticipate just, you know, the huge demand for miniatures right now while everybody is in quarantine, you know, like so many people are just painting stuff. I think I've been the most prolific with my miniature painting ever in the last year. I've gotten so much stuff done. And there's a lot of other people the same way. It's just, you know, we're all at home. This is a great thing to pass the time. Something that we always want to find time for, but you know, there's a lot of distractions, and right now is a great time to get your armies finished. Highlight a little bit of that. All right, with these last few minutes, I'm going to go ahead and try to wrap up this base. This guy right here. Oh, can't see that. 1 second. Let me find my thing. And for this, I like to use a fairly large brush, and I always try to get like on standard miniatures, I will like do all this basing stuff first. And I've mentioned this in the past where I like to get all that messy stuff done like way before you mess with any sort of detail painting, because like especially with dry brushing where it's, you know, you're kind of using a large brush, you're zipping all across the miniature as you go, like you're going to go outside the lines a little bit and you're going to get some of this color on the miniature's feet, whatever. But if you do it early, not only does it give you a better idea of the overall scheme of what the miniature is going to look like, because there's just such a huge area of the miniature itself that is the base itself. It also you're just going to paint over it, right? Like you're just going to paint over the feet and you're just going to touch those up again. So I've got a little bit of what is this color? This is called Iroko. It's kind of this kind of tan. I'm just going to dry brush this across the whole base here, right quick. Then I'm going to do another pass. And you can see that I've taken almost all of the paint off this brush. It's like it's almost dry. Like if I'm just painting it on this thing, you can hardly see it. It's only really going to pick up the edges or the raised areas, and that's all this texture on the base here. And if you want, you can just leave these other rocks, like, you know, that kind of color. It's going to look really integrated into the ground. But, you know, in these other examples that I showed you before, I like to pick out those rocks in another color because it just gives you a little bit of pop and a little bit of something cool going on. And then if you go through and add something like grass tufts, like on this variant of Boba Fett that I painted, it really kind of sets the scene and does some cool stuff. Ooh, where is my white? Here we go. Those lenses are a poppin', Gavenport. I love painting lenses. I'm a big fan. I think that they're pretty easy to do once you get the formula down. They're pretty fast, and they have like they just add like a lot of cool visual appeal, I think. All right, we'll just zip around here, dry brush this stuff. And then I'm going to thin down a little bit of anthracite gray, which is kind of a bluish gray like this. I'm just going to paint over those rocks right quick. We're just going to do this nice and quick because we're almost out of time. Oh. Any thoughts on painting handles, or have I always stuck with corks, spray lids? I like to just use cheap stuff, man. Like, I think that, you know, you can use painting handles. There's a lot of different manufacturers, a lot of different people that make them. But I just use a spray can cap and some 2-part putty. I have started to convert over to 2-sided foam tape. I think that stuff is awesome. You know, like companies like 3M and stuff make it. It is a great thing to have on there because it, you know, sometimes you risk with this poster tack and like this putty, sometimes it will stick to the bottom of the base or like do some weird stuff. But if you're just using that 2-sided tape, And I'll cover that in a future stream. But that two-sided tape works pretty great for my purposes. So this was just what I had set up before, but I have a bunch of other. I just use like a kind of a 2 or 3 inch dowel, cut it down, and then I have a whole bunch of painting handles for like a few dollars, and it beats spending a lot of money on some contraption that like holds on onto the miniature. Sometimes with those little gripper arms and things that go on either side of the base, I find that they kind of like they'll dig in a little bit to the primer and just cause a little bit of an irregular finish. The old ways are the best way sometimes. I totally agree. Okay. I've hit those up. I'm just going to take a little bit of white and mix it in here. And while these are still wet, I'm just going to go ahead and just paint in some little bit of highlights. It just speeds up the process and it makes the transition kind of nice on these rocks. And I usually like to have like the leading edge, or like the edge that's furthest from the base, be like the brighter of the two. And then they just kind of, as they taper down into the flat parts, make those a little bit darker. And I'll just take my second brush here. Oh, that base coat was a little bit wet, so it's gonna give me kind of a weird effect. It's nice if you're gonna use that technique where you're doing the 2-brush style. It's kind of nice if the base coat underneath everything is nice and dry and won't be pulled around or modified by your brush strokes. Okay, cool. So I went through and I painted all that stuff. Let's pull off this tape real quick so you can kind of see what this base actually looks like. I'm gonna go a couple minutes over here. I'm gonna really wrap this thing up. And you want to just use like a low tack masking tape, or like painter's tape works, like blue painter's tape. That works pretty well for me. And then you can just use like a rag or a little bit of something and clean off any sort of stuff you have on there. But now we have like this nice, really clean base. You can probably use a little bit of paint and just touch around the outside of it. We're gonna take our little droid here, and I just put a little dab of super glue on there so I can just twist him and pop him off. I'm just gonna put a little bit of plastic glue here. And what's nice about these flight stands is they're made out of the same plastic that will melt with plastic glue. So you can use this as opposed to super glue. Sometimes super glue will cause your flying stands to craze or like fog up a little bit. That little guy on top, hold him for a second. Buddy. Might take longer than what we have. Come on, fella. Here he is, laid back. That's not the angle we want. I don't think I got enough glue on there. There we go. All right, there we have. That is that little guy right there. We didn't get quite as much work done on our PK, but I think the big thing is I wanted to show you guys, or show you all the the way that I paint these lenses relatively quickly. I think they produce a nice, cool effect in the end, and it's certainly something that you can apply to a wide range of miniatures. So there you have it. That is today's stream in a nutshell. Thank you all so much for joining me. Switch back to the old other camera here. Thanks again. I had a great time. I love doing these streams. We are streaming every week from Tuesday through Friday between myself, Will Schick, and Dallas Kemp. We're painting a wide variety of miniatures every week. As a reminder, we're doing a big giant streaming event March 18th through the 20th. Make sure to check it out. We're going to cover a ton of stuff. You don't want to miss it. So everybody have a great weekend. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.